Good afternoon, Team Extra Space from the BIPOC ERG. District managers and BIPOC ERG chair members, Rob Isla and Jay Johnson here. We are very happy to report that we also have Rashi Peoples, the SVP of Operations, here with us today for Roundtable to discuss some leadership and success with Extra Space to share with BIPOC and the organization as a whole. Hey, Rashid.
Hey, Jay. Hey, Robert.
Hello, everyone.
I want to take a moment to thank you for the time taken out of your busy schedule to sit down with us. It really does mean a lot. I do want to say before we get into the questions, though, could take a moment and talk about how long you've been with Extra Space, some of the roles that you've had up until this point to share with Extra Space team?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for allowing me to be a part of this conversation. I guess in a few months, it'll be 8 years with Extra Space Storage. I started in October of 2014. And I started as a district manager and worked my way to Dallas, Texas, where I became a division vice president after a couple of years and ran the Texas market. And then now I'm in my current role, the senior vice president of operations of the West Coast in Southern California. So it's been a great journey, and I'm as excited today as I was on the first day that I came to the organization.
That's great. That's quite the history and progression with the company, inspiring already, and we haven't even asked you a question yet. So that's fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that, Rashid. I will start off with our first question. I will say, hey, special shout out to Megan Hammer and Adam Wiley for sourcing quite a few of these questions, as well as picking the brains of our BIPOC members on the Teams chat and a lot of our peers as well at the DM level, store manager, and AM level. So we've got quite a few pieces of feedback and really excited to hear some of your responses. The first question, I'll start us off here, and we'll alternate back and forth between Rob and I. If you would, please share with us what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you and why they're important, Rashid.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think for me, when I think of those three terms, there's harmony in between them. It's almost, the way I look at it is you focus on diversity because, our population, especially in the United States, is so diverse. And we're already in existence. We're sitting in the middle of different backgrounds, and whether it be experience and education or birth, or we're already there. And so we kind of have to focus on diversity. But when we do that, it inherently allows everyone to feel included in the process. And then, once you feel included, it kind of creates confidence, and it kind of helps one be the best version of him or herself. And that confidence sometimes can be the best way to put your best foot forward and be included as part of different opportunities. And so we're focusing on diversity. It creates that feeling of inclusion. Confidence comes from it, and it gives people equal access to opportunities. And I think that's kind of where the equity comes into it. And so that's kind of how I like to look at the three terms. If there's harmony in it for me.
Rashid, incredible share. Hey, you know what? I really love thinking in the terms of harmony and confidence. That's absolutely amazing. And then to piggyback on that, another question that we received from the field is, in your opinion, what's the most challenging aspect of working in a diverse environment?
That's an interesting question. I mean, as I think of that off the cuff, I don't know that, I know what the most challenging aspect would be. But I think if you kind of peel back the layer of the onion, you think of what would the most challenging aspect of any environment be. I think one of the more challenging aspects would be feeling like the minority, quite honestly. And so whether I'm a man walking into a room full of women or vice versa, you can think of anytime you feel like you're a minority in the conversation or the room, that can be very challenging. And there's definitely a lot of strategy that you kind of have to employ in order to kind of navigate through that successfully. So I think that goes on both sides of the coin.
Absolutely. That's a great call out, and agree 100% with what you had mentioned regarding the diversity, inclusion, and equity being all together. That's part of what got me into the ERG committee, ERG group, and knowing that strength through our differences is what makes us better. So,
Yeah, the harmony with it all, kind of like what you said. That's fantastic.
yeah, 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 I agree. A good segue. I got another one here for you. So, what's your approach to understand the perspective of colleagues from different backgrounds?
Yeah, I think, me personally, one of my undergraduate degree was in psychology. So I've always been infatuated with people. And, you know, I've always been infatuated with different backgrounds and cultures and foods. And so for me, it comes a little bit more naturally, because I think, if you have a passion for something, it's easier to digest differences along that spectrum of that passion. So for me, when I'm speaking to colleagues or others, I always want to understand where people come from and what's built them into the person that they are today. And ultimately that leads to, that kind of feeling of inclusion and that synergy and working together. And so that's kind of my approach, is just be passionate about it, be obsessive about people and where they come from, and be open to taking an interest once you do get an opportunity to listen.
I think that actually goes into another thing that we were talking about with the committee here, just the psychology of people and that understanding. So can you give us an example of how you make direct reports feel that sense of inclusion, belonging, and equity really on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I'm able to do that successfully. I will tell you that, everyone thinks about that. Am I doing this successfully? But again, it comes back to listening, being open to others' opinions, and then acting on feedback. I think that's the most important part of this is, once you're open to listening, if you get the feedback that you're asking for, then what do you do with it? Because ultimately that seems to help the most at supporting the sense of inclusion and belonging. Or I should say, actually, the reality of inclusion and belonging, because ultimately that's the most important part of this is one's own reality of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I agree that the higher the comfort level of your audience, the most and higher likelihood that they would provide that feedback. It really helps all of us become better. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on what you could do overall, kind of all encompassing, to make Extra Space a more diverse company. If there's any ideas or thoughts that you have specifically for us that are managers of people.
Sure. I'll answer it in a couple different ways. So first I'll say, I think the shortest way I can say is just to be an ally for integration and inclusion. And to give you some more context on that, I think professionally for me, through my career growing up, I've always tried to find a way to fit in to one category or another. In one part in fear of not being accepted, but more so in hopes of being embraced enough that I would be judged by the content of my character and the performance that I've been able to put forward within the organizations I've worked for, and not necessarily judged by the color of my skin or the sound of my name. And so it's always made me really cognizant of being an ally for integration and inclusion, because, when you focus on diversity, it kind of reminds us of the collective power of different points of view. And those points of view are rooted sometimes in experiences and education. So I often feel like I'm kind of one aspect of Dr. King's dream, right? And so I always try to aspire to make sure everyone has the same access and reality of inclusion that I've earned through my career. So I would encourage others to take the same approach. Be an ally for integration, for inclusion. Be open-minded when it comes to this environment. And I think that ultimately as leaders, if we can start there, there's just so much positivity, so much synergy, so much good that can come from that, and moving forward diversity, equity, and inclusion overall.
I think that's fantastic. Talking about Dr. King and being judged by the content of character, and really just some powerful statements that you had in there in general. That's fantastic. But I did want to get some final insights from you. So many say that empathy is a key to diversity and inclusion in a workplace. How do you practice kind of slowing down and being that active listener or an empathetic leader?
I think you have to again, one of our core values in our organization is passion, and everyone who's hired here, we know that they live our core values to a high degree. And so as you start to kind of process through anything that we're focusing on within the organization, you kind of have to be led by passion. With that being said, when you're acting and you're in the middle of a process, when you're done with that process, you have to be able to reflect. And reflection for me is what allows me to slow down and to be that active listener. And sometimes you learn after the fact, after you have a conversation, you say, did I interpret that the right way? Was I empathetic enough in that conversation? And it's only through those conversations with yourself or myself in these situations that you actually can now come to the next conversation and learn from exactly where there may have been some opportunities, and how you may have made someone feel, or maybe there's an opportunity to do more there. And I think for me, it's the lessons that come from conversations and experiences that allow me to kind of now in the future show more empathy and be a better practitioner of empathy as a leader. So again, it just comes through process. But if we don't immerse ourselves in these environments, in these conversations, then we never get to have these repetitions to be better and improve in these areas. And so I think collectively as an organization, that has to be something that we focus on.
I love the comment, leading by passion, reflecting, and then really taking on those lessons, I think resonates with a lot of us, right? So Rashid, I really love the conversation, and we really appreciate your time. As BIPOC chair members, we hope to provide resources regarding progression and development to really everyone at Extra Space. And with the insight that you've given us today, I feel like this will be a really great addition to Extra Space's already substantial number of tools to drive for that excellence that makes us just a little bit better, right? So thank you for your time, and I really hope everyone has a great rest of their day.